Hello there. Today I want to show my approach for pelvis rigging, and this is not a step-by-step tutorial. It's more like an overview. I will show the main points, and I hope that this will be enough for you to understand. If not, please write me in the comment that you want to get a detailed step-by-step tutorial, like click here, do that, and so on. Now let's get started. As for my project, I have a simple character, and I've prepared a few steps when I gradually improve the rig. And the skeleton, the default skeleton, is quite simple. It is just main bones, and as for corrections, I have twist bones, and I have some bones on knees and elbows, but it is not important in the context of the current tutorial, so I will hide them. So the pelvis area is not corrected. And at the very beginning, before we move any further, we need to double check that pivot points are in the correct position. And here I have a very simple principle. So basically you can take a look at the anatomy, but I prefer to have a quite simpler approach. Just go to, for my skeleton, I go to edit mode, I show everything. So I prefer to draw a line here from the groin to this part of the pelvis bone, so we actually can feel a hard edge here, to this one. And we can split this line in half, like so. And here, shift it a bit outwards. It will be approximate position of our pivot point on this plane. And in my case, everything is already all right. You may vary this position a bit, but the general understanding, the general position should be somewhere around this point. You may want to place the bone here, as thigh bone goes like this, but here we have femoral neck, as on the here. So here we have femoral neck, so the actual pivot point should be really here. Then the next thing, we need to check the other axis. We need to check another projection. And here also very similar principle, just half, splitting in half works well. So we are having one line. Now we need to cut off the glutes here. And also when we drag a line, we can take something like half and it will work. Okay. So when all these positions are all right, we can move further. And so, but before we move further, let me show you how this default rig works with automatic weights. I will assign with automatic weights, and let me show animations. So walking animation looks, I would say it looks okay. But if we switch to running, it is not that good, because here we have quite significant deformations. So the pelvis shouldn't be deformed like that. But if we just have this animation in game, maybe even is okay. And a lot of problems of this setup can be fixed with weight painting. And things like desk characters actually have a rig without correctives on pelvis, and they looks quite good because of good weights. And so we can improve this thing with weight painting, but I don't really like to do manual weight painting. So that's why I'll show you step number 1. Here, we do not have any corrective bones in the full sense of this word. We have just 2 additional bones. Let me show it here. Again, I have 2 bones, 2 additional pelvis bones. They are not for deformation. They are just to redistribute the influence of pelvis bone. They are parented to pelvis and they move together with pelvis bone. So it is just a way to distribute influence of pelvis bone. When exporting to a game engine, we will be able even to transfer the weights from these bones to the pelvis bone and then remove these bones completely from our skeleton, but they are quite good for automatic algorithm. So just few additional bones, and let me show how it works. So I assign automatic weights, and let me show how walking animation work, and walking animation works better also, but as for my opinion, the glute shouldn't stretch here too much. It should be more in original place. And running animation also, it looks a bit better. And dancing also, it's not bad. It's better than the default automatic weights setup with 0 weight painting. And I have a benchmark for testing extreme positions like here. And it looks quite all right. We are losing volume here on the glutes, but it doesn't look bad. So for most cases, maybe even this approach will be enough. And what's important for weight painting, I often see that these bones, these pelvis bones, are in the very low position, but with automatic weights, it doesn't work well, as for my opinion. I prefer to place this point, the tail of the pelvis bone and the heads of these additional bones. I prefer to place it somewhere in the middle of the anatomical pelvis bone. Next, the next step is step number 3. Sorry, the next step is number 2. In this approach, we have also we are having a few additional bones which are not supposed to deform, which are just to redistribute the influence of the pelvis bone. Here, let me show in pose mode. Here we have just 2 additional bones here, because this part anatomically should follow the pelvis, while when we applying automatic weights, this part will be rotated a bit with thighs. So that's why, to diminish influence of the thighs, we are adding small bones. And these bones, in terms of automatic weights, they are work differently from the situation when we just move this here. So in this thing, we will take too much influence from thighs. So I don't like to, as I previously said, I don't like to place these things at the very bottom. But small bones actually works well in terms of automatic weights. And these small bones, again, it is just to redistribute the influence of pelvis position. So after everything is done, we will be able to transfer weights from all these bones to the pelvis bone, and nothing will be changed. So, and let me show how it works with animations. So again, walking animation is okay. Running animation also is fine. Dancing is not as good. And I would say that this dancing animation even worse than step 1 animation, but it happens because we are losing volume of the glutes and we haven't corrected it. So this part looks even worse because we don't correct the volume, we don't correct the glutes itself. So this step 2 cannot be considered as an independent part. So when we do step 2, we need to go further to do correction of the glutes. And there are 2 options on how to do correction of the glutes. But before I go further, I'll show you also the benchmark here, how it looks like. So here we have problem here, but it looks okay. It doesn't look too bad. Some part is changed compared to step 1, but also we can improve it. And there are 2 options. There are step 3 and there is step 4. So let me show you step 3. So also step 3 is a development of step 2. And we have here actually real corrective bones which do correction. Here we have this bone for the bottom part of the glute. And for this bone, we need to make sure that axis, so if you don't know how to enable axis, you just need to go to the data of the skeleton and here viewport display and show axis. In my case, I prefer to have them in the 0 position. So to make it work well, we need to make sure that axis of this corrective bone, the main axis of this corrective bone, when we rise thigh forward, almost the same as the x-axis of the thigh bone. So we need to ensure that this axis looks in the same direction. In my case, they are not exactly in the same direction, but that's almost fine. I can even slightly wrong bone. I can slightly correct it. So X looks in the same direction. So, and then we are adding a constraint to this bone to copy X rotation of the thigh bone. So this corrective bone is parented to the pelvis. So if the constraint is disabled, the bone stays in this place. But we are adding some intermediate rotation, and this influences half, to add some volume to the glutes. And in this case also it's important to align x-axis with the x-axis of the thigh bone, otherwise it will not work. And let me show the animations. So we are adding volume here and it looks much better than before. So walking animation, I think it looks better. So running also is quite enough for games. But when we go to dancing, we can see some problems. here. We see some problems just because we limited rotation to only x-axis. The correction doesn't work well. And let me show it on isolated cases here. So on this isolated case, we have, so x rotation looks perfectly fine. But z rotation, when it does splits, doesn't look good. So it because we don't correct x-axis. So we don't correct anything except x-axis. And because the bones, the thigh bone and corrected bones, do not look in the same direction, adding these bones will not fix situation. So we can actually fix the situation before exporting to a game engine. So we can align these bones more like this. So to align all axes of these bones, all axes, and here, so z and x will be in the same direction. Here I'm aligning these bones. They looks better. And in this case, enabling the remaining axis will be better. So just let's see how it works compared to the left part. So it looks better than before, and it looks better than step number 1, then step number 2. Maybe step number 2 looks a bit better, but in generally, it's okay. But this rig doesn't work with automatic weights. I don't really like it. So this position of corrective bone, when it looks in the same direction as the thigh bone, doesn't work with automatic weights. So if we will apply automatic weights for this setup, it will be quite bad. So this setup works only if we assign automatic weights when the bone looks here and then move it back. So I don't really like this sort of approach. So that's why I do a bit more complicated setup. Here's step 4. It is an alternative way to deal with it. Here, as for pelvis, so as for the setup, so let's go to edit mode to see how the bones are located. Here I have more corrective bones. Here I have one bone at the top, and it is linked to the pelvis, and it doesn't contain any constraints. So I use this bone just to, again, as well as these bones, just to redistribute effect of the pelvis. So this bone will be always together with pelvis just to make this area more hard visually linked to a pelvis. And you can achieve the same effect just with weight painting. So if you don't want this sort of approach, you can skip adding these additional bones and just do all this weight painting manually. So all weights of these bones should be added to the pelvis bones. They should not move separately from the pelvis. They are a solid single part with the pelvis bone. So all these bones is just effect of the pelvis. Then let's talk a bit about corrective bones. Here, as you see, I have more bones, and there are 2 corrective bones and two mechanism bones. So let me show some deformation. So here, the basic principle is the next. So we have one bone in the middle of the glute, and it is the deformed bone which is linked to pelvis. So if we disable constraint, it stays with pelvis. But this position is not natural, so we have a copy of this bone. Here's a smaller bone, it's mechanism bone. It does not deform anything, so deform is disabled, but it is linked to the thigh bone and moves together with thigh bone. So, and we want to get something in the middle between this position and this bone. So that's why we are having the copy rotation constraint, which copies 30% of the rotation. And I like this approach more than copy rotation constraint from thigh bone because it works with automatic weights, because the bone is in good position for automatic weights. And additionally, we don't really need to care about this axis. And so, and it works. And the bottom part is the same. So I have the bone here that looks at the bottom of the glute. And here's approach the same. We have the deformed bone, the corrective bone, which is parented to pelvis. And we have the mechanism bone, which is parented to thigh bone. And these two bones are aligned perfectly to copy rotation in the world space. So I forgot to say that we need to copy rotations from the world space, and we are copying 60% of the rotation. So, and let me show how it works. So, and let's compare results with previous steps. Step number 3. Oops. So in this position, it is hard to see any difference, but these splits looks a bit better. And the next step, how to improve it, we can add constraints to map rotation to scale. So this part, we can drag it here. So controlling the Y scale of this bone, of this corrective bone, we can drag this part a bit closer to the center. And we can control also volume. We can also add some volume controlling this bone. And so let's go to these bones. I already have constraints in here. Let me show here. So the first one is X rotation of the thigh bone. So I can check the rotation. So the rotation of thigh bone right now in this position is -90. So I map X rotation from local space. It's -90, and 0 is the rest position. So I add to minimum, because here's the -90 in minimum. I'm writing here 0.9 to control the scale. Let me enable it. So we just slightly control this scale. So this, I think this is not natural position. So I prefer to set here sort of 90%. And we can copy this constraint to add another bone, to middle bone. And here I prefer to add a bit of volume. So here also the setup is very similar. So X minimum is -90, local space to local space. and here's source axis for y is x, and we are adding volume. So here's without correction. Here we are adding a bit of volume. Then to make splits look better, we are adding another. I will hide everything just to make it clear. I will hide everything. So in this case, just let me check. So Z rotation is positive 90 degrees. So we can add constraint to map Z rotation to scale of this corrective bone. So also from local space to local space, from rotation, and Z minimum is 0, Z maximum is 90, and we are mapping Y axis from Z axis. And again, I can enable this one. I'll hide this to make it more. And let's check how it looks. So here's without correction. Here's we can just drag it a bit to make it more natural. So in my case, 0.85 looks fine. And here also we can add some volume. Also very similar constraint to add some volume from Z rotation. Here's without correction. Here's with correction. So plus 10%. And also I will enable all these constraints for the remaining bones. So and now let's take a look. And I suppose that this is quite good, especially for automatic weights. So let me even show you that I Control P, automatic weights. So here are automatic weights. So zero weight painting, just a few corrective bones. And here, just as a very final note, let me show you how it works. How it works with animation. So walking animation looks okay. Running animation also looks okay. The bot stays in place. It is not deformed too much. So as you see, it's quite natural. And dancing also, it is not perfect for sure. We can do weight painting. We can do more corrections. So, but as for very easy setup, I think it works well. So we don't use any drivers. We don't use any coding, just a few constraints. Let me know if you have any better solutions, and some parts can be better. For example, we can improve something here. But as for my opinion, even with automatic weights, it looks good enough. So it is not perfect. This area is not perfect, and splits is not perfect. But I think that it is way better than automatic weights with default configuration. You may also want to improve this area. So there are overlaps here, but you may want to improve overlaps. Here, adding one bone here to drag vertices of this overlapping area up and here to add another bone to drag the vertices of this area along the thigh. But for my opinion, for this specific case, even without these additional corrective bones, everything looks quite nice. And the problem with these additional bones, because most likely they will not work with automatic weights. Most likely you will need to spend a lot of time to tweak weights of these bones. I have my approaches to manage these bones, and let me know in the comments if you want me to show how I set up these bones. But in most cases, I prefer to skip this part. I prefer to just leave it as it is. So, and I think it looks quite nice. Maybe some weight painting will be good, but even now it looks really, really nice. Not perfect, for sure. Not perfect, but much better than it was before. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.